Hey everyone, this is JD, and you're watching the Figgy Pop Collector channel.
Starting transmission.
Today, we're going to be discussing Ghostbusters, and not just the movies right now. No, before we discuss the movies, we want to kind of go back to the origin stories of Ghostbusters. What is Ghostbusters? Where did the movie come from? Who was originally cast in the movies? So we're going to start off there. So let's go with the origin stories of Ghostbusters. So Ghostbusters actually started from an idea from Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd is a famous comedian that was part of Second City and SNL in the early days. So the fun thing about Dan Aykroyd was that his family actually used to do like ghost seances and ghost hunting way, way back. So his family is already pretty much familiar with the occult. And so what's cool about that is that he was able to take that knowledge that he learned growing up and his fascination with ghosts and the other side and actually bring it to the Ghostbuster franchise. It wasn't until way later that Dan Aykroyd actually had an idea for a film that would combine his love of humor and ghost. So he started writing a script called Ghostbusters. So the film was supposed to star John Belushi and him. And unfortunately, John Belushi ended up passing away from an overdose, and that kind of put a halt in the plans. So he went out to his friend Bill Murray and asked him if he wanted to be in the movie too. From there on, actually, he actually got in touch with the director Ivan Reitman. So Ivan Reitman was best known for the movie Stripes and Animal House. And after reading the script, Ivan Reitman went to it and looked at it and said, "You know what? This script will cost a lot of money to make." So you're probably asking yourself, wait, why would the script cost a lot of money to make? You probably have seen the movies. You probably understand that the movies were about ghosts, had some ghost in it, took place in New York City. No, the original screenplay was way different than that. So, what was the original screenplay for Ghostbusters? Well, Ghostbusters originally started as it was about two pest control exterminators, Ghostbusters, basically, or ghost exterminators, and they would travel through time and space to hunt down ghosts. Yes, you heard me right. They were traveling through time and space. See, that's where the biggest change comes from the series. If you think about it, Ghostbusters, they're very much down to earth movie series, except for Ghost. But the original concept was fantastical. It dealt with traveling through time and going through history and capturing ghosts throughout history, going to their planets and seeing ghosts, going through their dimensions and finding ghosts. Completely different from where it is now today. So what ended up happening was that Ivan Reitman called his friend up, Harold Ramis, and said, "Hey, can you work with Dan Aykroyd? And we've got to bring the script and make it something that's not going to cost $1 billion to make." So together, Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis ended up rewriting the script, and that's pretty much where we got to the screenplay that we have today for Ghostbusters. He was able to bring it down to very much the typical story of three guys who are going to business for their own. All right. So now now you have a little bit of an idea of where the history of Ghostbusters came from. Now let's talk about the casting. The casting of Ghostbusters is very unique. You have a group of comedians, all that work under improv. They either came from Second City, they came from SNL, or from both. These were a group of comedians who all brought in their skill set to this franchise. And that wasn't always the case. So, like I said before, John Belushi was originally written in the role for Dan Aykroyd's best friend. Unfortunately, with the passing of John Belushi, that changed. When they were writing the roles for the new characters, you still had Peter Venkman, who ended up going to Bill Murray. For the character of Egon, they actually had Christopher Walken as an idea for that character. What a different movie that would have been if it was Christopher Walken. And I'm not going to do a Christopher Walken impression. I know everybody loves doing Christopher Walken impressions, but I'm not going to torture you guys with that. All right. So that role ended up going to Harold Ramis. And Harold Ramis had said in interviews that he couldn't see anybody else playing the role of Egon. And that's why he took that on. You had Annie Potts, who played Junie Mountainitz. And then for the character of Winston. So Winston was originally played by Eddie Murphy. Unfortunately, Eddie Murphy passed on the role, and he went on to go do a little film called Beverly Hill Cop. I know it's one of those films that nobody's ever heard of, but it's okay. He did good for himself, I believe. He's done really well. So who they ended up casting was Ernie Hudson. And unfortunately, the sad part about this is when they cut the role down from when they recast it from being Eddie Murphy to Ernie Hudson, the character of Winston was actually shortened by a lot. His character was actually supposed to begin very early in the screenplay, around page 26. Unfortunately, at that point, he's actually, I think, he's actually more than halfway through the movie before he even shows up. So that kind of stinks. And the character of Winston was supposed to be our everyday man, the guy who wasn't a scientist, who wasn't into the paranormal. He just wanted a job. So he was coming into this going, yeah, sure, whatever. There's ghosts. I'll believe you. And, and trust me, Ernie Hudson steals every scene he's in. And he's probably one of the few actors, too, that to this day, who still supports Ghostbusters just as much as Dan Aykroyd. All right. The next casting was for Dana Barrett. They actually reached out to a bunch of famous actresses out in Hollywood. The reason why Sigourney Weaver got it, and at this time, Sigourney Weaver was known as the girl from Alien, and she was kind of more in that genre, more of a serious actor, not for her comedic roles. And little and behold, it was actually Sigourney Weaver that gave Ivan Reitman the idea to have Dana Barrett be possessed by Zool. There's a funny anecdote about that. So what ended up happening was during the audition process, Dana Barrett actually pretended to be a dog on the on the couch and table of Ivan Reitman, and it was during that scene they were cracking up, and they were like, you know what? Yes, this is our Dana Barrett, and the rest is history in that case. Another big part of the movie was the role of Louis Tully. So that originally went out to John Candy. However, there wasn't many agreements on how the character was going to be portrayed. So, like Dan Aykroyd wanted a more of a downtone, serious performance. John Candy actually wanted to make him German and have two dogs, and he wanted to rewrite the script his way. There was a lot more competition in that sense, and fortunately, John Candy had to pass on the role. And luckily, they got another actor, a little unknown actor from CTV called Rick Moranis. So Rick Moranis was just an up-and-coming actor, done a few roles, hadn't got the big hits like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So got the role, and he brought something else very different to the character of Louis Tully. He's that nerdy accountant character, even though he does have different jobs in the later movies. That's so strange. So, but that's not here or there. We're only talking about part one right now. The other big character that was cast was for the character of Gozer. Originally, they had thought about having Gozer be more of a business character, and they actually went after Paul Reubens for this role. You're probably thinking, wait, Paul Reubens, I know that name. Who's Paul Reubens? Paul Reubens is Pee Wee Herman. What a better different movie that would have been. So what's next? The next part was the special effects. So this movie was actually on a tight schedule. They actually had only about a year to actually make the movie. And under that tight schedule, they had to do many things to keep that movie production going. So one of the things they did with their special effects was they hired somebody from Industrial Light and Magic. You may know them, from a little movie called Star Wars. But this group here, these guys from Industrial Light and Magic are the ones who ended up creating all the ghosts for Ghostbusters. And they were filming it almost simultaneously with the movie because the special effects were all pretty much new. They were doing stuff they hadn't done before. And of course, look at all the ghosts we've got in the movie. You have Slimer, who, funny enough, little anecdote about Slimer, his name wasn't even Slimer. His name was Onion Head or the Ghost of John Belushi. Yeah, they would call him Ghost of John Belushi because they actually reminded him as his character from Animal House. So that's kind of a little funny anecdote. And Onion Head was his actual character name in the screenplay. It wasn't actually until the real Ghostbusters cartoon series came out, they actually named him Slimer. And we all know what happened then. The next special effects they ended up doing was for the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, who Dan Aykroyd described as being a character, a mixture between the Michelin Man and Pillsbury Doughboy. So that's kind of what his character is kind of based off of. And you can see it when you look at him. And this was your classic guy in a rubber suit. like Godzilla and all those characters from back in the 80s. It's a man in a giant suit in a miniature city walking through the town. You know what? The special effects in this movie are done so great. I know in today's world, you could tell the difference between the special effects and everything. But in 1984, they were stunning. They were mind-boggling how we were able to achieve with that movie. With that being said, I mean that pretty much gave us, they gave us the designs for Slimer, got the designs for Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. As for the other ghosts, they were all mixture design. They were all different types of designs that the special effects team did. Like for example, the library ghost. Fun fact about that one is that the library ghost that was in the movie wasn't actually the original design. You can actually find the design for the library ghost in Fright Night. Yes, the movie about vampires. They actually used that ghost in that movie. So the ghost that ended up appearing in Ghostbusters is a more of a tame version. They actually believed the ghost could be too scary, so that's why they went with a different design. As for the other ghost in Ghostbusters, it helps bring a bigger enrichment to the world of Ghostbusters by having all these different types of ghosts. From the taxi ghost, the library ghost, the wingbat ghost, the Slimer, you name it, all these different ghosts all bring something unique to the story. So now we go from talking about special effects to now talking about another issue they ran into, the name Ghostbusters. They actually didn't even have the rights to the name Ghostbusters originally when they did the movie. When they wrote the screenplay, it was called Ghostbusters. But however, there was a little cartoon from the 70s called The Ghostbusters. Live action series from Filmation was actually holding up them calling the movie Ghostbusters. They did not want to license the rights to the name at all. And it actually took many, many attempts to get that name. So what ended up happening was that when they were filming the movie, it actually went through two titles. So it was either called Ghostbusters or Ghost Breakers. I wanted to sink in a little bit because can you imagine the film being called Ghost Breakers? What a horrible name for a movie. I don't think it would have the same pizzazz or anything if it was called Ghost Breakers. So when they were filming the movie, they actually filmed it under both names. They would reshoot scenes, Ghostbusters, Ghost Breakers. Even the name on the building was called, they filmed it twice, once with Ghostbusters and then again with Ghost Breakers. And that is because they didn't even think they were actually going to get the rights to the name. Luckily, the Ivan Reitman and his group said, you know what, we keep doing this, we're wasting too much time. We're going to just do it with Ghostbusters, and told the studio, you need to figure it out, and we're going to be able to shoot. You had to work with Universal and Filmation and get the name for Ghostbusters. And the rest of that's history. The whole rights with that name is why the cartoon series is called The Real Ghostbusters. And that cartoon series came out in 1986. And lo and behold, Filmation was really wanted to keep that name. So they actually had their own cartoon series called Ghostbusters. They came out in 1986 also. So we eventually got the name Ghostbusters, which I believe is a way better name than Ghostbreakers. All right. So now we got that. We've talked about the cast. We've talked about special effects. We talked about the name of the movie. Let's talk about the next important thing, and that's music. So Ghostbusters has probably one of the best soundtracks for a movie during that time period. See, when they were trying to figure out what to do for the song, they actually reached out to a couple of different artists. One of the artists, interesting enough, was Huey Lewis in the News. More on them later. They eventually went with Ray Park Jr. And Ray Park Jr. only had a few months to actually come up with the actual song for the movie. So, and actually he tried different things. There's interviews with him where he talks about, oh my God, it was difficult to come up with this name. What rhymes with Ghostbusters? And everything like that. And then actually it was all because a little commercial that you see in the trailer and the little commercial they played during the movie and a commercial you saw at 2 a.m. about a pest control, plumbing business and stuff like that he realized, oh, this song should be like a jingle. It should be a jingle for a commercial. And thus was born Ghostbusters. And that song became number one during that time. It was a hit number one song for the longest time. And you know what? Still to this day, when you hear that music, you know exactly what song's about to play. Unfortunately, like always, when you start making too much money, you might bring unwanted attention to yourself. And that's actually what happened. It was actually Huey Lewis and the News that actually brought a lawsuit against Ray Park Jr. And this was due to them copying a song of theirs. Unfortunately, the case was actually settled outside of court, and they're not supposed to actually discuss the whole case and everything like that. June comes around and the movie is finally released to the public. And nobody was expecting this to be a hit. And you know what's crazy about that? It actually was probably one of the biggest hits of that year. And with that being said, that's our little origin stories for Ghostbusters. For me, Ghostbusters movie that means the most to me because it actually was the film is what got me interested in the movie business. That's a big deal. And if you can tell, I'm a big Ghostbuster fan. So that's either here or there. I mean, there's a ton of information. A lot of the stories I got were actually from this book, Ghostbusters, The Ultimate Visual History. If there's anything you guys have heard about Ghostbusters, go ahead, share it down below in the comment section below. I'm interested to hear what you guys have heard, any interesting stories you've heard. And that will conclude the first part of our multi-part series on Ghostbusters. Next time, we're going to be coming back to you with a review of Ghostbusters 1984, followed by a review for the other movies. So Ghostbusters 2, the reboot, and the Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like I said, we're all leading to the March 22nd release of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And until next time, guys.
That concludes a Figgy Pop transmission.